much do you understand about what goes into whenever you make a banking transaction, whenever you trade money from one party to the next? There's different
Like
vendors or
from one bank to another bank?
yeah, exactly. So you got Zelle for that. That's very common these days. And then there's third party places that they're not banks, but they do facilitate transactions and exchanges of money like Venmo or Cash App. And all of these places they have these we've all heard of please allow 3 to 5 business days to process your transaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's because in order for the transaction to be validated and verified, it has to go through several points of validation. And so it's like, let's say that you want to send your best friend money for pizza, and let's say that you do something. Zelle is very fast, and that's because they have the whole concept is getting rid of how long it takes to transfer payments, and it prevents a backlog and other problems. But for real large payments like your paycheck, whenever you're
Mm-hmm.
on payroll, your employer, they basically issue the first step, which is they tell their bank, hey, this is the routing number and the banking information for the person that should get this amount of money. And so he will send that request to his bank. His bank then has to verify that request was authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, their bank has to communicate with the receiver's bank. And there's all these little steps in between. And that's why it takes 3 to 5 business days. Currently, just last year, there was a bill that passed that allowed for the Federal Reserve. So this is called the Fed Now service. The Fed Now service will be available to depository institutions in the United States and will enable individuals and businesses to send instant payments through their depository institution accounts. So the whole 3 to 5 business days will go away. It'll all be instant.
Like for everyone?
For everyone. This is
Wow.
for you sending money to your grandma, to your best friend for drinks last night, and for
Mm-hmm.
your employer. So the whole concept of waiting for Friday is payday. Your employers will be able to pay you daily. And if they do want to make Friday payday, then they don't have to send out the. So usually what happens is, since it's like it's usually 3 days. I mean, the system has gotten pretty fast. It's rarely actually at 5 days unless it's like a more complex or, out of the blue. But um, usually if you're getting your paycheck on Friday and it's getting deposited into your account, your business that your employer has put that request in the previous Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
Um, so this would be where your employer would be able to say, well, due to how we run things, we like to. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody still, every now and then, you'll have a job where they're like, well, for us, payday's on Monday or Tuesday. But basically, this will make it so that every single employer, the whole concept that Friday is payday, that'll pretty much vanish unless for whatever cultural reason
Yeah.
people prefer that.
So why do
Uh,
they like with businesses that are paying you? Why? So some do like weekly, some do bi-weekly,
yeah,
once a month, twice a month. Why do they do that?
it's just easier. It allows them to not have to process so much paperwork. Like payroll, have you ever heard? Have you ever asked someone what do they do, and they're like, "Oh, I work in payroll."
Yeah.
That's just making it more practical for the people that are in that department. A lot of that has to do with, number one, the number of employees that you're sending out,
Mm-hmm.
and then number two, just like how organized the business is, like who is actually running a payroll. Some
Yeah.
people, the payroll is run by the CEO, or the CEO, and that's usually a smaller business, or it's run by, like, a CEO will like hire, like they'll tell the manager of whatever the business is, that they've hired, basically their like main assistant, the person that really makes it so that they can sleep at night rather than them having to worry about every little thing. They'll handle it. So it's really just about the dynamics of how any business, chooses to operate it. Some of them do it
So now
weekly. Yeah.
with this bill passed, if somebody's like, all right, I want these guys to get their money tomorrow, could they do it the day of, and we could get our money instantly then, or
10 seconds.
10
Not
seconds?
tomorrow, 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Wow.
Yeah. And that's because instead of it going from where it starts from, it's you, the employer, wanting to send money to your employee, your employer sends it to you, send it to your bank, and your bank has to send and process it to their bank, and then their bank can actually put it into their account. And sometimes, depending on how different banks, because also a lot of banks are owned and are like sub businesses of larger banks. So, like, I can't remember off the top of my head like what banks are all owned by the same bank, but there's larger banks. Like, this is the fundamental structure of how all banks are. You have very large banks, and they're technically commercial banks, but they're not like the commercials that you see, like Bank of America and Wells Fargo. They are of two separate banks, but like I'm 90% sure that Suntrust and Wells Fargo are under the same bank. So let's say that you're in Bank of America, which is not in the same one as those two. Let's say that your employer and you're the employee. Your employer has Bank of America. The employee has SunTrust or Wells Fargo. It has to go from Bank of America to whatever bank owns Bank of America, and then that bank has to send it and verify it to the larger bank that owns Wells Fargo, and then Wells Fargo verifies it. So it really matters about like kind of the size of the bank, how many different layers it has to go through. But the
So,
reason why this will
yeah,
change, yeah.
I was gonna ask. So, because before it took a couple days to authenticate it, now it's gonna take 10 seconds. Is there gonna be more? Is it still like the same level of authentication? Like, can somebody make it easier
Yeah,
to?
so it's
Would it be
not the same
easier?
process happening. It's not the same process happening
Okay.
faster. It is a completely new process. It is, and this is
Is
the
the
reason why
process more flawed though? Like, could people be stealing?
not just any particular people. And this is where I mean I don't like to get into conspiracy theories here. I mean we all like
The
to
man's
dance
taking
around
your
them because,
money in 10
but
seconds instead of in five
here's the
days.
thing. This is how this works.
Yeah.
Every single bank account, it's basically the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States, which is also a bank that is underneath. Uh, Basically, they are all under this one bank called like BIS. I can't remember what it stands for, but I can look it up really quick while I'm talking. Um, the Federal Reserve will basically they won't own, but they will have like their hands much deeper into the inner operations and the transaction processes
So then this
of all other
bill.
banks. So your bank account
Uh
or
huh.
your employer, you'll have instead of it, there's like your employer sends it to his bank, sends it to the larger bank. They send it over to the other bank, who sends it down to their dispersed banks, then into your bank account. It'll now everyone will just be, and this is whether it's Zelle, anything, all transactions will go straight to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, and then straight to the next person's because it's basically bypassing all the steps and making
Uh
only
huh.
one step, which is why it's 10 seconds. And the reason why it took
So.
them so long to do this is because they'll be processing. So, like Visa processes about 40,000
Mm-hmm.
transactions per second.
So is
Um,
it anything like this is probably a really dumbed down version,
yeah,
but
no,
you got like a
that's what we're here
burger,
for.
you got a burger shop, and then
Yeah.
McDonald's is like, "Hey, we're taking over," and now everybody's got to report to McDonald's.
Um, Not like in terms of banking. You're saying like if the banking system was a burger joint, and we're comparing it to
Well,
this would be kind of like
like
McDonald's, where it was to take over all burger joints,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now McDonald's
owns
determines the resources for all burger joints.
yeah,
They'll do their best to make it where if this particular burger joint gets like Wagyu beef from Japan,
yeah.
the highest of quality, they'll make sure that they'll do their best to make sure they still get it even from the same supplier. But McDonald's will be taking over the actual business management side of the process. This is an analogous
But that is what it's
representation of what's going on with this banking
okay,
change. And,
and
and
yeah,
the bank that is above, this is the BIS. You guys can look this up. Anybody that's listening, is the Bank for
big.
International Settlements,
Oh,
and
I was
that is
gonna
the bank
say
of
big.
bank of banks.
I was gonna say big intense shit or something.
It is some pretty intense shit. So not
Yeah.
too far off. But I
Now
only
I
bring
have
this up because, yeah,
yeah, I
what's
was
up?
gonna I was gonna ask. So what if so let's say McDonald's took over all like what if all burger joints went away and McDonald's was the only burger joint? What like that would be in its own right. Um for some people it would be great, for others they would hate it. Could that ever happen with banking where there's like Goldman and Sachs is like, all right, we're everybody's bank now. So like a federal bank, like we just have one bank that like the government can control us 100%.
Well, here's the thing about the Federal Reserve. The name is very misleading because it's the Federal Reserve. That makes you think of federal law, the federal government.
Yeah.
They are not tied together. They are tied. They are connected. But the government does not tell the Federal Reserve, the central bank, what to do. The president can choose because just like with an elected office leader, there is terms that have a certain number of years that the head of the head officer, basically the equivalent idea of a CEO of the Federal Reserve, um, there's a limited number of years to that person's term. And the president of the United States, whenever that opportunity comes up, they are the ones that pick who that person will be. So there is this incentive of like, if you want to get a second or third term, then you have to kind of appease the powers that be to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it is your job. The Federal Reserve's fundamental job is to regulate uh, basically the economy, but they do it through regulating monetary policy. And so they have basically two tools, more or less. Um, they have other tools that are technically what's classified as their tool belt, and people use this example all the time of them having a tool belt. But basically, they can raise interest rates, and then they can also they basically remove debt from the system. And they put it like on the sidelines, and that's what you've heard of whenever you hear the concept of printing money. What they're
Mm-hmm.
really doing is they are buying bonds. So you've heard of the phrase stocks and bonds
Yeah.
before, correct? So stocks, most people understand what that is inherently. Stocks and shares are the same thing. It is a small share. It is, if a company, when they have their initial public offering, their IPO, that's their launch to becoming a publicly traded company on the stock market, they will determine before that happens how many stocks their company will be split up into. So they could pick 1 million, they could pick 50 million if they want to. And then the total valuation of their company is split up by that number. So let's say that you've got $1 billion company and it's split up into 1 million shares. Then that means each share would be worth $1,000. Now, on average, most companies do much more than just 1 million. They will usually do, maybe 10 million at least. I think Facebook, I'm not even going to comment on that. I was about to say Facebook, I think was like 10 million, but I can't even, that is way too far in my memory for me to even have any confidence in that. But
Mm-hmm.
um, you take the total value of your company, and also when you go through an IPO process, your company's usually much worth much less. So, like, if you were to imagine taking Facebook's total value, or Meta as it is now, and splitting it up into only 10 million, then you'd have this like mega billion-dollar company into only 10 million shares, which would make its the valuation of each share close to like put not add 1,000. If it's 1 billion and it's divided by 10 million, then that would only be $100 per share. And so if they're like worth $50 billion, and that would just mean 500 or anyway, I'm not doing the
So,
math on that. I was
so
about to say
what's
like,
the why would somebody want their shares to cost more and have less shares, and why would somebody want to have lots and lots of shares so they cost less so anybody could buy them?
a lot of that gets into the psychology of the trader and of the average buyer. So here's the thing. So what really delegates a stock price to go up or down? There's many different layers into this, and a lot of people consider this all to be so confusing. It's really not that difficult, but there are aspects. So I haven't like put this into three different levers, but basically the first one is when the big money, which is institutions like hedge funds, who, if you are a person with $1 billion to your name,
Which I
you don't want to
am. I
lose.
have a
Yes,
$1 billion. Yeah.
yes, Mr. McBigglebucks.
Yeah.
If you have a ton of money, you put that into wealth management. Okay, so people have heard of, like,
Is
oh,
that a
the
soap
rich, they have
company?
a way. Exactly. It's just a company, or a bank specifically. Sometimes it's considered a hedge fund, but there's a lot of different ways that there are people out there who they specialize in making sure that your money makes money without you having to do anything about it,
Do
and
they
it
take
makes
like
so much money that they can
15%?
collect. So actually, the funny thing is that the percentage, the rate to beat is 10%, and that's because on average the S&P 500. Do you know what the S&P 500
Yeah.
is? So the S&P 500 on average grows by 10% a year. So the
Okay.
whole concept is, if the S&P 500 is such an easy index to just invest into, then why don't I just, invest into that? Then I
Yeah.
don't have to pay anybody some small share of the profits as doing a service. So you, as a person, if you want to attract other people to get their money so that you can turn their $1 billion into $1 billion plus, maybe, let's say, $5 million in profit at the end of the year, and then you're going to be able, you get to claim, let's say, maybe 10% of that, and that's just one customer. So you're claiming 10% of $5 million, and then that's like $50,000. Um, so that's like one customer, $50,000 for the year. That's, and I'm not even certain that those are the percentages that they charge, but basically their goal is to make more than 10%. So if you make 11%, then you now have a sales pitch. If you can make up to 20%, I think the highest I've ever heard of is a guy that started to consistently make, it was like 18 or 19% a year. Now there are years where some hedge funds and wealth management and investment companies, they've made insane returns of like 40, 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they do it through so many different avenues, where sometimes they'll get like one of the, so they'll take like your million or your $1 billion, and they'll invest it into like over 100 different variations. Or really, when you first give them the money, you'll discuss, like, I prefer to invest in, the energy market, or the defense market, or whatever kind of, I actually just recently joined a charity, and they have a fund that helps them uh, develop money for making donations, and they have a thing in there about, we would prefer to avoid things that are causing pollution and
Mm-hmm.
contributing to
Now, see
climate
where
change.
I only like invest in things like oil and uh
That's the thing, man. See, like, all
what are
right,
the thing? What's like those things out in the oil pumps out in the ocean that that will like blow up and then it'll just kill all
the
the
oil rigs.
yeah, those oil rigs. Like that's all I invest in.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it's not a bad idea. This whole concept
I
of,
hope you know that I'm joking because the way you were like,
yeah, I
yeah,
do.
yeah,
I
man.
do know you're joking, and I joke about this, but this really is actually a very fascinating concept to get
Yeah.
into. I mean, this really opens up a can of worms. So
By
we
the
can
way,
either
you
go
look
back
like
on
an
the topic.
investigative journalist with like the jacket and the glasses. Like
To a
the way
certain
you're
extent,
talking, it's like
I do.
I've been
I
doing my
investigate
research.
what
Yeah.
money does. Yeah. And it leads you to have to understand so many different other parts of the way that the world works. I mean, like, when people say money makes the world go round, that should be a good hint that if you want to figure out what's going on in the world, then find out how money works. And then when you find out how money works, you can find out how to track what is going on with the world, because then you can see, like, well, what are the banks doing? How do the banks work? What's the banking system? Because obviously everybody knows, yeah, the banks have all the money because
Hmm.
everybody gives them their money as a means to say that it's safe. Um, but at the same
So
time, banks lose your money all the
if we're
time.
getting on like the Andrew Tate, Gary V, Logan Paul train of hey, grind whatever. What we're
That's not
saying
what I'm saying
is
at all.
no, but what
But
I'm saying is if for 2023 we should all be starting banks, like make your own bank.
So if everyone started a bank, that's like everybody starting a restaurant. It's like, what's the point? we all
Yeah,
at
but
this
only
at that
like,
point, it's just everybody has a really nice kitchen. It's not that
well,
everybody
like
has a
like
bank. It's
how
just everybody
like
has their own vault, and
Tate
which would make banks
or
unnecessary. That's what Bitcoin is. But like
hey, you don't like
that,
Bitcoin?
no, I do like Bitcoin. I'm not going to say,
You
in
made
some
some
recorded thing,
money
but
from
I
that.
made a lot, not some, I made a lot of money on Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
it was partially dumb luck, but I learned very much about how it works and what the trading cycles are on it.
Yeah.
And it really is not that difficult to make money on it. It is a bit of a gamble, but there is also some truth to it. It's
What about
one of
the
the
other
most
coins though?
complex, interesting things you can invest in.
Like lithium or
I mean, Litecoin.
yeah, whatever. There's Litecoin,
So
there's
so a lot of people don't
then they
understand.
got the
This is also
classics too. And then the Dogecoin. There's so many
yeah.
coins.
Dogecoin was literally made to be a copy of Bitcoin, except in like a meme version of it. Um, and so it didn't really have the same level of like practicality because,
You're saying it past tense. It's still rising, man.
yeah,
It's
I know.
still in the
First of all,
game.
it is not rising. Literally, that's one of the other points I wanted to bring up today is the Silicon Valley Bank had a bank run today,
Oh,
which
Ethereum
basically
was the one
started
I
to
was
lead
thinking
to
of.
very large fears of liquidity in the financial markets. It's a huge. So, when we talked last, I told you that I wanted to get into discussing 2008.
Yeah, but I was gonna ask, what do you because people say that like Ethereum is like the number
Okay,
two
so
behind Bitcoin.
people should think of Bitcoin as digital gold, and they should think of Ethereum as digital,
Silver?
almost real estate, not silver.
Okay.
Almost like real estate, except well, yeah, digital hard drive space. Here's the thing. So Bitcoin is digital gold, in that it is literally just meant to be based on a ledger. It is traded like a currency. Ethereum is more like an investment in a company that regulates the future of digital development on the concept of the difference between blockchain and just the regular internet. Now, the blockchain does work on the internet. A lot of people don't understand it. So the way that all of this blockchain and why it's called cryptocurrency is because back in 2005 there was a development of new technology called cryptography, and that was where basically they found a way where you could create a cryptographic like condension. You could basically use cryptography allows you to condense information. So let's say that you have uh, some data, some statement on data. Technically, it's called a string in terms of data terms, but say that you have a string of data, which is a series of either numbers or letters or combined. And let's say that it is 1,000 characters long. Cryptography is a way where you can take that chunk of data, you can feed it into this machine, and it will spit back out um, something that is drastically fewer characters. So it allows you to store a lot more space, and it also allows you to encrypt it so that it's you need to get through like a security protocol in order
Yeah.
to
Now,
read that data.
I don't remember, but because if you like think of a Bitcoin as a stock, like how many like can there be an endless amount of Bitcoins, or is there like a cap on that?
There's a cap.
Okay.
It is 21 million. Currently, there is either upper 18 millions or lower 19 million that have been mined.
So it's almost
Um,
done.
nope. It is meant to be. Do you know what a logarithm is?
No.
It's like the inverse of an exponential.
Okay, you're using
So
big words, pal.
exponential means
Yeah,
over time it goes faster and faster and faster. Logarithmic is basically saying
the
over
opposite.
time it gets slow. It approaches and it gets
But
slower
like
and
yeah, but
slower and
like what
slower.
we're close to. I mean, within just looking at the numbers, you're close to it all being gone. But it might take longer for it to.
Oh, it'll take until I believe it's 2150 for the last one to be mined.
Okay, and then
The
at
way
that
that it works
point,
is the way that it works is if you were to look on the price history of Bitcoin, you would look at the peaks
mm,
of the price before it has the major capitulation, the major crash. You'd see that they're all roughly 4 years away from each other. And that's because in the initial imprinted code of Bitcoin as a system, every 4 years it will take a computer twice as long to solve the algorithmic problem that will allow that computer to mine a new Bitcoin. So the way that mining a Bitcoin works is that there is an algorithm that produces a problem, similar to the concept of how, if you've ever heard of a 256-bit encryption, what that means is that there is the computer for its security measure. This is basically like if you've ever heard, we have a computer that calculated a new record number of decimal points of pi, because pi is an irrational number, so it has an infinite number of decimal points afterwards. Or they'll say we are measuring our computer based on its ability to calculate as many prime numbers as possible. Prime numbers version is a much more suited example for this. So a 256-bit encryption means that the computer, its key to unlock the security measure is that the other computer trying to basically hack in or gain access has to find out what two prime numbers can be multiplied together that will equal this 256-digit number.
Mm.
The 256-digit number does not have to be prime, but the two numbers that multiply to equal it do. And so for that and it's 256 digits long. Like, this is a very large number. So it has to, first off, the computer has to be able to calculate a very high number of prime numbers. And then on top of that, it has to run many, many tests to see which ones would multiply together to do that. So the way a computer works is, it can calculate, it can multiply. Everyone's used a calculator. I mean, you can give it huge numbers and it'll calculate something very quickly. But when you're dealing with something that is 256 digits long, and it's a mystery because it has to find the two roots that are like prime roots to find that number, then it takes the computer. I mean, I think that it's said if you have a good encryption, then it can take up to 30,000 years for a standard computer to do it. So you take that fundamental idea that's the way that it is that simple of an idea of how
So you could
computer
just be
security works.
like son, and keep the family alive, because in 30,000 years, our family will be rich.
Yeah, we'll be able to finally crack Bitcoin in
Yeah.
30,000 years, which, I mean,
At that point,
we're in the year 2023. I mean, look at how much the world has changed in 2,000 years. In 30,000 years, yeah, it's a total.
yeah, Bitcoin won't even be a thing.
Exactly. I mean, humanity might not even be. We are still a thing. So
Yeah.
that computer that you're trying to hack would be on the verge of basically
It
turning to
probably,
dust
yeah,
pretty
nobody
much.
wouldn't be maintaining it after a while.
Exactly.
Yeah, the nukes would
But
take it out.
so Bitcoin, you are getting digital gold because there's a limited amount, and every 4 years, the rate of how many can be accessed. So think of, this is how I think of it. You know the game Tetris, where the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing is you're constantly stacking all these different shapes, but if the shapes ever get above the ceiling, then it's,
It's done. Yeah,
the game's
yeah.
over. Think of it where almost like maybe Mario, those Texas Instrument calculators that had Block Dude on it, but it's just basically it's like the shape of like the Tetris game, and there's 21 million blocks within the Tetris game. And instead of it being that a shape is falling down and you have to move it and sort it around so that it makes a full horizontal layer before it, in order to keep the game going, it's really you're just mining blocks. Except every 4 years, the number of blocks that get mined from you hacking your hammer away at it is
Mm.
is cut in half. This is where it's logarithmic. This is where half is multiplying something by half is in some ways the opposite of multiplying it by two. One of these processes doubles, one of them halves it. They're the opposite version mathematically. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
other ways to define the opposite, but so this is why exponentially it goes faster and faster and going near infinite amount of growth in a near infinitesimally small amount of time,
Hmm.
versus logarithmic, which is it will take a near infinitesimally long amount of time for it to go an infinitesimally small amount of development. And that's kind of like how logarithmics work, as you approach their ends, because in calculus, it's called a limit. Um, and you learn about you plot logarithms, and that's not the only way to come up with a limit you can create anyway. This is not about
Can
math,
you
but
tie this all back into the bill that was passed about banks?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So there is people call this a conspiracy theory. It is absolutely not a conspiracy theory. It is something that is very much debated. It is very much in motion. It's not an absolute certainty, but it is definitely a probability at this point. There's something called a CBDC, a centralized uh,
Cannabis.
no
Just
uh,
nice
uh,
some rub some oils on yourself.
a centralized bank digital coin.
Okay.
Um, it's basically the Federal Reserve. This is why all this ties back to. So the Federal Reserve currently, and this bill will become active in. It's stated that it will say. I mean, if you look up like when does the Fed Now service launch, it will say somewhere between May and July of this year of 2023. So what that allows is it allows for them to have direct access to every single person's bank account. Now, it does not necessarily say, and something that the Federal Reserve already does is they do what we consider printing money, but what they're really doing is they're buying debt off of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bonds are sold. This comes back to 2008. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, how much everything is connected, but bonds are sold in these large collections of basically think of them as like contracts of debt. And debt also is attached to the concept of interest. So if you go out and you get a loan for something like, say, a car or a house, you're also going to be paying interest on that until you're done paying off the entire loan. So if someone wants to, they can, or what the banks will do is they will take all these different debt obligations that they have, they will package them together into what is called a bond. And there's different sizes of bonds. And you can buy that bond, and then you'll be basically guaranteed to take in the interest. And It's kind of what's considered one of the safest forms of investing, because the only way that you would not get your, percentage of your return on investment, your ROI, is that basically there'd have to be like a total collapse of the banking system, because pretty much these things are more or less like guaranteed by the federal government, or just by the banking system. I mean, nothing is ever really guaranteed in this world, but um, basically what happened in 2008 was that the banks literally lost everyone's money, and so the federal government had to go and have a meeting with the
Yeah,
Federal
they just were
Reserve.
like, we buried it in the backyard and we can't find it
Yeah.
anymore.
So what happened in 2008 was really that the Federal Reserve, they took with their endless, I mean, literally, they have an infinite amount of money. This is why they call it printing money, because it's really coming out of nowhere, where they will be able to say, so the Federal Reserve has access to the spreadsheets to add money to the total balance of the big banks, and also a few very large institutions that they'll occasionally buy these bonds off of. And so they will buy a very they basically in 2008, what happened was they gave money to all the banks that were basically on the verge of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is, or let me say, there was a standard of something called fractional reserve banking, and this is something that in a lot of people they would say like that's kind of fundamentally criminal. It means that
The government being
basically,
criminal? What? No.
yeah, I know, wild. Uh, the bank only has to keep a fraction of what it is supposedly keeping reserves for all of its customers, and basically the society that it serves. The rate used to be 10%. So that it used to be that if the bank was supposed to be liable for holding, let's say, $40 trillion worth of people's money and their
Mm-hmm.
investments, they only had to actually have at any given time on hand 10% of that. So the bank is basically incentivized to gamble with 90% of all of the money. On top of that, you have them giving out loans to people that are they in, like, I mean, the inherent nature of taking on debt with the vast majority of people, and how many people don't understand how to like
Yeah.
audit their own behavior and audit their own spend and avoid impulsive behavior. A lot of people are basically taking a gamble on whether or not they'll actually be able to pay off that debt.
Yeah.
So that's why, and the system is designed where it should allow for some people to default on their debt, and they don't necessarily have to go to prison, but you do lose basically all of your credibility with the banks. And until you get a very high paying job and you give them some time to, not hate you anymore,
Yeah.
they will refuse to give you a loan for anything. So you're basically on your own financially. But to be honest, it's how most people should be anyway. But nobody really is, and debt is very much incentivized for the sake of, let's have the growth of 5 years from now happen today. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how debt is used. But all of this ties back into the CBDC, the central bank digital coin, which is it's just like the concept of Bitcoin, except the whole point of what makes Bitcoin this hot topic to talk about is because the creator, who would have the power to kind of manipulate it or do the things that banks do with our money already, first of all, nobody knows who he or she is. It could be kind of like the concept how some people think that Shakespeare was a collection of people instead of one single person. There's or how they think that Homer, the writer, sort of like the predecessor to Shakespeare of a different age, was also like a group of writers. This would be kind of like the concept that it was a group of, economically and financially very wise computer programmers, like a group of them that created it. And it's almost, just like a group of people that all together maybe did within themselves in a way that the public doesn't even know about. I mean, this is all conjecture, but like nobody knows who it is. And that person, they own 1 million of the Bitcoin. So
Mm-hmm.
out of the 21 million that eventually one day will be unlocked, they own 1 million. So the question is, if that person is alive or if they have access to those funds, they could crash that market overnight if they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to. They could literally, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that this is the only thing that separates Bitcoin from all of the different, like basically Ponzi schemes, and just scams in general that are out there around crypto. And that's because other coins, the creator and the person who does have access to the whole system, who could crash it all overnight, everyone knows who they are, and they are actively trading and using it. Now, they do usually sign kind of a documentation or make some kind of a public promise and sentiment, or they create some kind of a natural incentivization within their business structure that for them to not sell. But very commonly, you'll see these very small coins. You'll see a bunch of people FOMO into them, and then the person that created them says peace, fuck you guys, and then they leave and they go off to
They go
Switzerland.
go to some island and have a sex cult.
Mr. Epstein, yes. So I mean, like all
I
all
was
of this is
thinking
based
more
around.
who's that guy? Sam, the ugly
Oh,
people.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a spicy story. Did you know that he gave that he was the second largest donor to the Democratic
Yeah.
Party?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to associate like fraud with the Democratic Party. Who would ever do that?
Republicans are
They're
they're
both
fraudulent as
awful.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
here's my
I was
question.
wondering. Yeah,
Why don't we just go back to like trading fish to like for like some cotton? Because
because how
like
many people can fish consistently? How many people are good at fish? How many people have actual
I'm
skills
saying why
where they
don't we
can
just
create
what
goods?
cuz like what's it going to take? First of all, what would it take for us to
Let me
be
explain to you.
like
In a world where we trade fish and carpets and sweaters and food and things, the goods are produced by the people that are trading them.
Yeah.
How do we end up with computers where everyone has one instead of just the most powerful people?
Yeah.
Having a system that is based on a medium of currency, actually, despite how
We
the
handle
nature
it.
of economics, no matter what the exchange is, whether it's coconuts, dollars, or just good fine goods,
Yeah.
1% of the population always, this is throughout history, will accumulate more of the resources than anyone else. But having a medium of exchange allows it so that even though that disparity will happen, it still allows it for the cost of innovative new inventions and discoveries to become much more accessible to the common household. Because otherwise, it would be like, okay, so iPhones are a thing, and there's a lot of them out there, but the trade for it is, I mean, you got to give your firstborn child and
A
um,
million coconuts.
a million coconuts and like 50 pounds of
Cows.
salt
A few
and
cows.
cows and a little bit of land. And it's like, no one can do that though. But I can go out and work labor and just accumulate this medium of currency that also can be traded much more faster. It's everyone agrees. It's like if you were trading raw materials, then you'd have to go to the guy that has what you want and be like, what do you want? And he'd have to stop and think and be like, well, my kid needs a blanket. My car needs a new tire. My house has a hole in the roof. If you can fix those three problems for me, it's like, well, shit. I mean, I'd much rather just have something that I can pull out of my pocket
But
that will allow you to go fix all those
wouldn't
things.
life be such, so it would be actually, could be simpler if we all lived that way. I mean, and this is like, I'm thinking post-apocalyptic world where we're trying to rebuild and everybody's nicer, we're all in like the Midwest,
Mhm.
like those type of people. They're like, oh, your neighbors, like,
Well,
they're,
they did a study to test the effects of just how many bad apples does it take to ruin the whole batch. You could have a population of 10,000 people if you put one psychopath in there that will manipulate everyone and trick everyone. He will end up at the top and he will ruin it for everyone. It literally takes one bad apple to ruin the batch.
so we just have to kill all the bad apples.
But how do we determine who they are? The quandaries of
We could
life.
make some kind of, well, AI. We could use some kind of AI system that determines whether or not we're good or bad. That would
Exactly. That would
work.
take general AI, except if we taught general AI to determine who lives and who dies, how do we know that if we imprint it into its system that in some kind of a way it's allowed to justify murdering a person, how
Hmm.
do we know that it won't eventually evolve its understanding to say you all are pieces of shit, you're just varying
Yeah.
pieces of shit. Some of you are 10%, some of you are 1%, some of you are 90%, some of you are 110%
Hmm.
pieces of shit. And so the whole thing is, this is actually like a really significant thought is, there's evil, there's malpractice, there are things wrong with the world. How do we move forward? And so you have a lot of these people that have all these different ideas about, well, there's all this oppression, there's all this inequality. I'm not saying to completely abandon it, but you do have to understand that there is this concept that humanity will always have problems, and all we can ever do is trade off problems. You trade one problem for another problem.
Hmm.
And sometimes in the process, over time, you can eventually develop better and better ideas, and the cost of that problem onto the average person and onto society as a whole is diminished more and more. So like we went from having to survive by we would have to go and hunt for food. Well, the food would become sparse whether we're going for plant or animal food based on how the weather was. And so when people started to learn how to do more like mass agriculture, and there started to be one person that was designated to do whole crops, which that's even happened in the Amazon. That's not like something, even some of the most primitive societies of today that are existing in the far corners of the earth, they still practice agriculture, most of them. So like that's a very fundamental idea to society. And then we introduced it into a whole nother scale of industrial size where you've got these corporations and like these farming companies that just own, I mean, basically like it's like maybe two or three different companies actually own like 90% of all the farmland, if not
I
more.
have a
That's not
question.
exact statistics, but it's something like that.
I
Yeah.
got a question. So, have you ever went on a date and then you like they said something about like this kind of stuff or anything that you're interested in, and then you went on like a long rant and then they never wanted to speak to you again?
Um, I have my ranting and my honest and the like, let's talk about shit.
Yeah.
And
Do
then
you
I
ever do that on dates? Like you filter yourself when you're on a date?
know, yes, when I'm on a date, I understand if I talk to this person about some real shit, it freaks them out. There's this quote, and I think that it was Oliver.
Tree.
No, he's
Life goes on and on and on. I know
no.
that
It's
one too.
basically if you're gonna tell people the truth, you need to make them laugh, or they're gonna want to kill you.
Ah,
I can't remember the guy's last name. Maybe Oliver was even Oliver was the last name, but
Oliver
he's.
Stone.
I think that might have actually been Oliver Stone. Uh, but basically, and to be honest, that could have even been from like Shakespeare. A lot of these quotes they get, miscredited as just because one newly famous person starts using it all the time, and it's like, well, actually, that's an idiom that's been around for much longer,
Mm-hmm.
or idiom's technically not the right term for that, but it's just a phrase, a saying. But um, like the real threat to society is actually people's ability to manage their own um, sense of reality and their own. So this is a concept that I ponder on a lot. The laws of the world are written on paper, and that paper is stored. It's technically now it's on a database, but it used to all just be written on paper, and it's almost like a spell because it's kind of like so we with the power all agree that this will be the law. But there is nothing in the writing of the law and writing it down that actually enforces it. It is everyone agreeing. So the rules of the world and really the world in general, the whole concept of what is the world, what is society, it is a concept that is shared among all people's minds. And whenever people disagree about what is reality, is when you end up with these problems where people go out and they do like protests or riots and stuff like that because people are like, this is not what the rules should be. And a lot of times they have a good point, but also a lot of times, just because you're mad or because you're sad or because someone did something wrong to you doesn't mean that you're inherently right. Uh, you know, this is one of the points I brought up to you earlier is if there's two people that are in a debate, just because the person wins the debate does not mean that they are actually, it only means that their opponent was just not prepared for the debate as much. But you can have a public debate or you can have a debate amongst your peers and you can watch the one guy who you're sitting there and you're rooting for him and he eventually gets the guy that you don't like what he's saying to shut the hell up and to sit there with some kind of look at disdain on his face. That does not mean that your opinion was right. It really just means that the guy who's saying the stuff that you disagree with was not as well prepared for the argument, and he did not know why he believed what he believed as deeply as the guy that you supported. So this is the real fundamental problem: is that there is a truth about how we should run society. There is a truth about, what is human nature and how do we predict it? How do we prevent the worst parts of it? How do we care for ourselves? How do we form our perspective of the world? And people debate these in many different ways through politics. It's usually politics, but at the end of the day, you don't know until you really are honest with yourself. And a lot of questions about what is human nature about, you can find that within yourself because you are yourself a human. Who's better to consult other than yourself? But most people lie to themselves. Most people are impulsive, and this goes. I think I mentioned this in our last discussion, but this is why most people are actually still children. This is why most people, when they turn 18, they're like, "Cool, I'm supposed to be an adult," and then they're like 25 years old, even, and they're like, "How am I an adult?" This is where the whole joke of like adulting comes around. Like
Mm-hmm.
people don't really understand what it means to have self-control, to know yourself very well, to understand that you are capable. A great thought experiment would be, if you were a German in Nazi Germany, would you fall into the like mass psychology that led people to do that atrocious part of history?
Uh-huh.
Because that's actually that's like mass psychology is where it's kind of like you're just sitting there and you're seeking for the path of least resistance for your own self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually it gets to a point where it's kind of like you're lulled and like almost like drifting off to sleep. You slowly drift into this world where you are allowing horrible things to happen in commonplace.
I got
And
a couple questions for you.
yeah,
Let's do some rapid fire questions. Try and
okay,
answer
well,
these three questions in under 30 seconds, okay?
it's getting a little spicy. Yeah, let's change it up.
All right. So, first of all, if these three questions under 30 seconds. How do you think we can, as a society, change to become the best versions of ourselves as, let's just say, America, because we're Americans living in America? Us
I
as
I can give you an answer right now.
Okay, that's my first one. Second of all,
Okay.
how do we do it individually to improve ourselves? And then third, what's your favorite meal at McDonald's? Go.
Number one, education. Number two, education on both a personal level and both a public level. Public education, being that teachers should be much more vetted in the same way that people that become cops should be much more vetted. And then personal education in terms of the family unit needs to be very much incentivized. There's oddly, there's a good argument out there that there's an incentivization,
You got
an
about 10
incentive
seconds left.
but I'm technically answering two, so I deserve 60 seconds for this. The first one's already done, but the family structure should be also a very significant portion of where a person learns, not necessarily where they learn history. They can learn history and mathematics and science from their parents and from their siblings, but mostly they need to learn their way of being and their ability to control their emotions and to look at themselves as imperfect so as to avoid the delusion that is bias. So most people, they grow up and their parents just don't want them to cry, so their parents just give them whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have parents that were raised well, then their parents will understand, I need to be patient. I need to not give this child whatever they need or whatever they want. I need to teach them what they are
Now
experiencing
you got like 10
by learning
seconds.
to articulate it to them. Everybody needs to learn how to articulate themselves, and this will allow them to say things out loud, and it will allow them to convey ideas to others, and it will allow people to check themselves. And people in general would learn from the family structure and really society, but especially the family structure, things about themselves that allow them to have more control and self-awareness. So self-awareness and education, but really all that comes down to education and relationships. Okay, and finally, what is my favorite meal at McDonald's? Whatever doesn't make me shit my pants.
Which would probably be.
The fish fillet. I'm kidding. That's
Yeah.
probably the word.
I don't think I've ever had the fish fillet. It sounds like a
Yeah,
mistake. Wasn't that?
comically, that was their most iconic release in all of
Didn't they do
history.
that just so
Bigger
the
than the Big Mac.
Christians would eat because like the Christians would eat burgers on Sundays or whatever?
Well, I can tell you this much: that chicken is literally just like taking everything that is in a chicken and throwing it up into a blender, plus a bunch of hormones, plus those chickens were fed like probably some plastic in their feed. Chicken is probably horrible quality chicken. The burger meat, literally, they found in a study, I think it was back in 2018, that 1% of almost all the meat in the United States has human DNA in it. That's fucking disgusting. Um,
Also, remember that thing about Subway where they couldn't really find like tuna DNA in the tuna or something?
yeah,
They couldn't
like it's all
figure
fake
out what it
too.
was.
I think the only thing that might be real is the fries. So
Okay.
I would probably say the fries, but even
Yeah,
that has
I was
a
gonna
bunch
say
of
that.
trans fats in it
Yeah.
and a bunch of polysaturated fats that end up just doing horrible. Well, they don't do horrible damage; they cause horrible damage. A lot of people don't understand that what fats are. Fats are the resources for your cells to basically put up a shield around themselves. So if you have the wrong fats, then the shield doesn't hold strong, and your cells are vulnerable to free radicals and other types of damage and cancerous and other types of dangerous proteins in your body. Um,
So, should we talk about suicide now?
yeah, Canada.
Oh,
Canada has
Canada.
recently legalized, and a few people have heard about this, but they recently legalized last year. I believe it went into law in like November, maybe it was December.
Starting in
That
March,
people,
people.
yeah, starting in
Yeah.
March, starting this month, people with mental illness will be allowed to legally get assisted suicide.
So, wait, so if it's diagnosed mental illness, so like if you have autism, you can just be like, I want to die?
I don't know about autism, but maybe I do know that they're making it very easy for young depressed people to off themselves in
Sounds
a
pretty
peaceful
good.
way. It's
Sounds
almost
pretty
I mean
good.
like so I mean
I
if
should
you look
become a
at
Canadian citizen.
yeah, exactly. I mean shit, there's a couple people there's another story that we have on our agenda for today about a mentally insane man who tried to hold up a plane with a knife. He
Oh,
could go to Canada.
which guy?
That's gonna be my new little like secret way of saying that person can go off themselves is they can go to Canada. That's a really fucked up thing to say, and I don't really mean it.
Yeah,
And
that's a horrible thing to even if you try like even if you're like talking about like I was gonna say Charles Manson, but even then I probably would say yeah Manson can go die. Like I
Manson can go to Canada.
yeah, but like other people, I don't know. It feels like at some
It's
point
really fucked up.
yeah, even if they've done terrible things, you still feel a little bit of like, oh, that.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I am not really pro death penalty. I mean, there's a significant debate to be had about the cost of keeping someone alive when you know that society cannot allow for them to come back out and interact with the public. Um, but that's kind of what also a lot of people don't understand is that there's a difference between your personal morals and understanding the greater good and societal ethics. I'm not saying that this is a way to justify, the death penalty or murdering capital murder, but very much so, there is a reality to you can personally believe like, oh well, if Charles Manson, was the cause for the death of one of my family members, I would hate him forever. I would want him to suffer, but also at the same time, I would not believe that it is my right or anyone else's right to say that he should die. That's a very clear.
realistically
Um,
speaking, though, if somebody murdered your family, do you think, realistically speaking, that you would want them to die and be like, or do you think you would let like,
I would probably figure out how to become a ninja
okay,
and murder
so do you
myself.
think your morals wouldn't
I'm not
stand
saying I
up to
think that it's
that
right. I'm not
point?
saying I think it's right. I'm saying
But
that if someone murdered my entire family, everybody has their breaking point.
yeah,
And this is what, I'm not saying that like if it actually happened, that's what I would actually do. But I do know that I don't know just how strong those emotions would be because I've never experienced
or
in
how
my life
strong your
something this
morals
strong.
are, like,
Well, no,
like
because
being
here's the thing: people break their morals all the time.
yeah, yeah.
It doesn't mean that they don't still consider those to be ethical and
It
moral,
just yeah, you're
absolute. It just means that they are facing the fact that they are not truly they're not perfect.
yeah.
Like this goes back to the whole concept of if you were a German
They're gonna
citizen.
use this
Uh,
against you someday when you're in court after they find
Context,
the
for the love
guy
of
that
God.
killed your family dead in his apartment with like
Yeah,
several
they might.
stab
Well, at
wounds.
the same time, I'm pretty sure it would be hard to find a jury that would not feel some sort of sympathy for me.
Yeah, but I'm
If it was proven
still
there was this
like
guy.
still they probably. I'm curious to know if there's been like a case where I mean
This is why I wear the shade so they can't see my eyes and
I know
identify
there's
me.
been
This is a
like
fat suit.
there's this case of this guy his daughter got murdered and I don't know if she got raped but I know she got
I think
murdered
this was in like Texas, the one that you're about to bring up.
and he the guy found the guy that killed his daughter and then he killed him and I think he confessed to it and he went to jail or something.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing something about this in like the state of Texas, which very much sounds like Texas.
Mm-hmm. We love
personal
guns and we
justice.
love barbecue.
Yeah,
Justice, guns, barbecue, which is a great way to
and
live.
hats,
And
cowboy
Joe
hats.
Rogan.
Well, recently, yes, Mr. Rogan
Yeah,
has been
he's
adopted
he's the
by
mayor,
the
gonna be
great
the mayor of the
son.
entire state.
Yeah, honestly, I do think that people give Joe Rogan a harder time. I'm not saying that I think he's right about everything, but if you were to judge someone off of intent, I think he's much better than most of the people that are out there that are like spewing their bullshit onto the internet.
Yeah. I don't
Which
know
I
if it
think is
was
part of
an
that now.
edit or not. I'm pretty sure it was an edit where he was like talking about like it's crazy how we can like put like decide whether or not somebody dies based on I forgot what he was talking, and then he's like, "Hey, do you want to see this video of this guy hitting a moose?"
I think, yeah, that probably was an edit, but at the same time, he's done a lot of drugs and he sometimes
Yeah,
just likes to have
he's
fun. I know
also
that he
he's just
like
like a
drinks whiskey and
bro. He
smokes
is
weed.
like he's I mean he's still kind of smart, but he's kind of just still a bro that's like
He's only, here's the thing though. Think about this. What do you think the average person would be like if they were having conversations with leading experts of almost every single field in the world weekly
mhm.
for 8 years? They'd, even the dumbest people would be like, that guy has some interesting talking points, and maybe he's not an idiot. I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is a total idiot. You know, there is definitely a certain level of luck to the development of his podcasts, but it is kind of that's sort of the nature of things. Is that he got into it by just trying to just it was a way for him to pass time. It was him and young Jamie just looking up like kind of just being truth seekers and doing it in a public forum.
Mhm.
Um, and they recorded it and put it out there, and more people were like, "Dude, these guys are looking up if aliens are real. This is
Yeah.
something good to get drunk or do whatever your state's legal drugs to." So um, he
Xanax and
stumbled into it, but at the
vodka.
same time, he's managed it very well. Not so much because of his intellectual knowledge, and it's because of his emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
He's able to conduct himself very well, and he's able to stay focused, and keep the orientation of the show on the purpose of learning more about partially who is this person that's some type of an expert in wildlife or astronomy, but also just obviously learning what do they know that the public doesn't know, and
Yeah.
finding a way to get them to open up in a way where they're not just answering questions, they are elaborating, and they're answering questions without them even having to be asked, because deep down people that are experts in their field, they're very much aware most of the time what is common in their industry or in their line of research that the public is not really discussing or not really aware of within its public discussions. So
So, what are your views on this whole suicide thing in Canada? Are you for it or against it?
I think it is an absolute horrible idea.
Okay, but do you
Think
think
about this.
people
How
should
many
be allowed this opportunity?
under specific circumstances, but if you actually look into the bill, you can be 18 years old and you can go to a doctor and tell that doctor that you're depressed. And then that doctor will be like, yeah, sure, you can absolutely, we will help
I
you. We
bet
will
there's
make sure this
those
happens.
doctors that are in charge of those kind of decisions. They're probably like they've been wanting to they're like the surgeons who are like, is this the day where I make a mistake and kill
I mean,
this
I'm not
guy?
saying that
Like they're
there's
just looking for that rush of, oh, I killed somebody.
a lot of it comes down to incentive.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're out there trying to necessarily kill people. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely uh, record of some people literally just trying to get into medicine so that they can like give people the wrong medicine and kill them.
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing, but the vast majority of doctors are not trying to do anything like that. But if you do give them an incentive, to them at the end of the day, it's just medicine, and medicine does incorporate some level of policy. So if
Mhm.
the policy dictates that this is considered medicine for you to give 18-year-old the A-OK to get an injection into their arm that'll kill them, but it'll be the solution to their depression, because that
I mean,
18-year-old makes a very convincing case that they just have no hope, when obviously they're making this case in an emotional state of mind where they're going to exaggerate, they're going to be hyperbolic, and all the descriptions of their life. And honestly, the fact that a young person has the right to legally commit suicide over a mental health issue, and this is not like, you know, just like the extreme cases. This can be just like, what's considered technically extreme depression.
mhm.
Lots of young people in today's age have very heightened sense of depression, and then a lot of
Mhm.
that has to do with the fact that social media is this brand new concept that's being introduced to people, and people are under a very out of touch, very convincing argument that the world beyond their life is so much better than for everyone else, and that it has also in the past been so much better. Today's world and the average person lives a much better life than anyone else in history by far, even more so. Like you could go 10 years
Yeah,
back,
but I
and
bet
most
the
people live
cowboy,
better.
the cowboys that could go to the saloon, they could, I bet. I mean, they had fun with their buddies. Nowadays, your buddies are, too busy jerking off and watching Twitch all night.
Yeah, but that's also part of the reason why your buddies that are watching Twitch all night, why they might get depressed. See, when a cowboy gets depressed, it's because some real shit's happened.
Yeah.
At the same time, they are weathering much larger storms in their life.
Yeah.
So they kind of learn the whole thing about the
Also, those
idea.
cowboys, they learned back in their days, like suck it up and just keep on going, and then they would never even think about killing
Exactly. You
themselves.
suck it up and you keep on going. Because the thing about suicide and the idea of that is, first of all, if you ask anyone that has been suicidal in the past, and then you talk to them now and they're no longer suicidal, that means something has happened that has made them realize that, it's not like the only people that go from suicidal to non-suicidal are people that win the lottery. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I
people
used to
can
be
end up.
suicidal. I'm not
Yeah,
suicidal anymore.
I mean, me too. To it, I try not to like bring that up because you never know what. But like it was a long time ago. So like,
Yeah.
I'll just say, so when I was in high school, I was definitely depressed, but I was in like a boarding school, and so it was just too much going on for me to really sit there and like kind of sulk with myself. But then during college, I definitely knew that like I was not doing very well with my relationships. I felt like everybody just liked me for this completely different version of who I really like was developing and becoming inside. And I felt like I didn't really have anyone to be honest with. I was doing people's homework because I was really good in school. So I'd do people's homework so that we could all go out and get drunk, and I wouldn't have to be getting drunk by myself. I
Mm-hmm.
actually prefer that if I'm gonna have a drink to just have it by myself now, and it's not due to like being a closet drunk or some kind of like depressed lonely person. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I don't really drink now. So if I am going to drink, then it's going to be because I want to drink. It's not going to be because I need to drown out some thoughts or find some kind of a social lubricant. So I don't really need social lubricant anymore because now I'm
I
like, if
just
this
need
person disagrees
lubricant.
with me,
Period.
yeah, I mean, lube is great. Um, but, like the whole concept of suicide is basically you have just like this idea of you don't know what tomorrow brings. And when you're in a suicidal state, you are very much convinced you see nothing but evidence for and no evidence against the idea that tomorrow will only be worse. And the day after that won't be any better. And the day after that won't be any better. And you
There's. I was gonna
you view the
say,
world
yeah.
through where it will never get better. But
Uh,
you don't understand is that life happens in seasons and life changes all the time. You change by nature. Your body's hormones develop differently and you see the world differently, and that makes you pursue the world differently.
mm-hmm.
It makes your peaceful state of mind much more practical. Your brain, your whole genetic makeup incentivizes for you to not be suicidal. It
I'm gonna.
incentivizes for you to have children.
I'm gonna say I agree with you on like you never know what tomorrow holds and all that, but there's got to be at least one case where somebody was like, I really want to kill myself, and then he didn't do it, and then the next day like he had the worst day, like
Yeah.
his town was on fire, he was burned alive. Maybe he did die that next day, but like it would have been so much better if he had just killed himself the day before. You never know.
Yeah,
But
but what if in 10 years what if in 10 years, I don't know if you believe in destiny, but let's say that if he just waits 10 years, if he suffers for 10 years, he will end up becoming, by literally just the luck of the draw, one of the wealthiest people in the world, and he finds the love of his life. And there's medical interventions that happen that relieve him of any kind of pains that were going on. That 10 years prior they said we're going to take 30 years. This is the thing. Have you ever heard of Moore's law?
no, I've heard of Murphy's Law.
Yeah, Murphy's law. Anything bad that can happen
No, anything that
will
can
happen. But
happen will happen. Not
yeah,
bad,
yeah,
just
okay, okay,
anything.
Interstellar. So, uh,
I
so
watched that like last week, I think.
yeah, I know. I know that movie. I watched that movie. It has a lot of quirky, cheesy shit instead of
It's a
actual science,
it's a
but
fun
it's
movie
still a
though.
good movie. Solid
Yeah.
movie. Solid movie. Um, but Moore's law is the idea that the rate of the number of transistors you can fit onto a microchip, or the basically how small you can make transistors, will exponentially increase in the number that you can fit onto a small, defined amount of space. And so that has to do with how small you can make microchips and how complex you can make a small microchip, which then turns into the develop that it's not necessarily a correlation of an exact same rate of exponential growth of all technology, but it does mean an exponential growth of the capability of the microchip, which then has a correlation of still a consistently increasing capability of what kind of technologies you can produce, which means innovation will happen at faster and faster rates.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people saying that Moore's law was proven wrong over the last like 10 years, but at the same time, that's not true at all. More transistors on a microchip leads to more precise more precise technology, and you're able to make more precise robots and stuff. And one of the stories that I'll touch on this like super quick because I know that we're
Well, yeah, we
going
should
into
probably
time.
wrap up.
But one of the big things that happened today was North Korea's, starting to flex nuts on South Korea.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons why Americans should be so concerned about that is because while people talk about China invading Taiwan, the biggest reason why that's bad news for the United States is because the United States is the hub for all of innovation in the world. And like I was just talking about, innovation is based off on the back of the development of high quality semiconductors or microchips. And the greatest and largest producers of those in the world is Taiwan, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They're publicly traded. And then the second one is Samsung, which is out of South Korea. And Samsung actually just recently, released 2 or 3 months ago, saying that from the standard is a 5 nanometer production rate, which is really just a term. It's not really an exact measurement of anything, but it references about 51 nanometers to 80 nanometers of the size of each transistor, and a
Mhm.
nanometer is a billionth of a meter. So that would mean that you can fit potentially billions of uh, transistors onto a microchip that would fit into a phone, because it's not a nanometer, it's not a meter as flat, a nanometer thin meter long line is a billion. So you wrap
Mhm.
that up, put that into something the size of your fingertip to have a microchip that has a billion transistors on it. The standard current is a measurement of 5 nanometers. They're saying that by 2025 they'll be able to do it down to 3 nanometer, or maybe it was even 2 nanometers. No, that's right. The standard right now is 5. They can currently produce a 3 nanometer production. The smaller, the better. They're saying by 2025 they can do 2 nanometers, and by 2027 they are on track to do 1.4 nanometers. So the reason why
So,
this is an important thing is because
yeah,
they may
yeah.
be able to be our only way out of this problem, where we would have a hope of avoiding a need to defend Taiwan. Because if Taiwan is taken over by China, number one, China might learn actually how to make this level of an advanced microchip, which they don't, which is part of the reason why America maintains supremacy over them. A lot of this has to do with
Mm-hmm.
microchips.
So
So
China just wants to get Taiwan back because they want good microchips. They want to be better
yeah,
than us.
basically what happened with Taiwan was back in, I want to say it was like the 70s. It was really not that long ago. Um, they had a regime change and they had basically a coup that happened where the current party that's currently in power, they overthrew their previous like president or like their lead commander. That guy and his loyal fans all went over to Taiwan, which is like that was originally part of China, but they declared their independence from China, but China never really, they just didn't want to go over there and like kill their own citizens and destroy their own infrastructure because it is a very important part of the infrastructure because that's where they have some of their most important production goes on there. But Taiwan has been acting as a separate entity from China ever since that happened. Like, so it's only been like 40, 50 years since that happened. So this is just like, it is literally a parallel concept to how the Ukraine left the Soviet Union not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Except the Ukraine deal has much more broader implications on the concept of Soviet Union versus NATO. But
I
China is not really something that people have to worry too much. China is really just trying to get Taiwan back, and China
mm-hmm.
just wants to have China. Everybody just wants to be
I
what
feel
America
like
is.
this three-way of Ukraine, Taiwan, and South Korea could be its own like episode. We just talk about.
The biggest concern is actually the relationship between Saudi Arabia and America.
Okay, well then I
Uh,
guess it's a four-way now.
well, that's because Saudi Arabia. So you've got Russia has tons of natural resources that facilitate the production of a lot of stuff, but they don't. They have barely any development in the tech sector. They have barely developed, modern economy. Um, China does not have a lot of resources other than like labor as a
Mm-hmm.
resource, and so that's why everyone outsources all of their labor to China for much cheaper rates. That's allowed China as a company, as a country, to have more and more people that are making an income, which there's more and more people that are able to interact in the marketplace, and so more and more people are able to have a broader base of customers for them to create things and sell them. So it's just in total, American and Western and just global consumerism, since the vast majority of labor is outsourced to China, is feeding the growth of the Chinese economy, which in turn, the economy is really the source of power for any country in today's times. The thing that most people don't understand is you don't really need to worry about China going, because the two of them rely upon each other. China's biggest nightmare is that America finds someone to replace China for the labor. And the truth of the matter is that Mexico is actually shown to be kind of promising for that,
Hmm.
which a lot of
I
people
mean,
don't
they do clean our
respect that.
houses, and
Well, the real metric is that the complexity of labor that the Mexican person can complete is almost twice that of
yeah.
it's like
I mean,
70%
I will
higher
say the
than the
two
average Chinese person.
fastest restaurants, like when like you go to order to like the time it you order to the time it gets to your table is like Mexican food and Chinese food. Those are always the fastest to like get to you.
Yeah, dude, because they don't sit here like
They're just
getting caught up in politics. They are an old school culture that is all about no
maybe
whining, work hard.
maybe we should just let
I'm not saying that's an absolute right for everyone, but
China and Mexico should just take over. Mexico takes over America
Mexico
and
is
then
I mean, if you think America's corrupt, man, like South America and Mexico, their their power structures are awfully corrupt. They are more run by mobs and cartels than government
it's great.
structures.
It's fun. It's fun time.
Yeah, corruption is cool.
Yeah, I mean
Corruption's
like
cool, kids. Drink that Kool-Aid.
well, should we call that good?
Yeah, we can go ahead and cut off here,
Let's
and
end on corruption.
please like and subscribe. Put things in the comments, and we can go further into them. I can have a full-on rant. I've ordered a disco dance light, and I
Yeah.
can go crazy and talk about the, you know, insane stuff that's going on around the world. We barely touched into most of it, but that's because it
Yeah.
takes would take a very long time. Like, I don't even think we finished going to the CBDCs and that whole conspiracy.
No, we didn't, but we
But if
can.
you'd like to know more, please comment. Please feel free to subscribe to Pizza Buffet.
Yeah.
And if you're one of the already wonderful
You
subscribers,
cut
please know that
out.
we
You
love
cut
you.
out. Say that again.
If you're one of the previously subscribed subscribers, please
No, none of
understand
them.
that.
I would say 90% of those people like saw a clip, they thought it was funny, subscribed, and then have no idea who I am.
Yeah, well, maybe this will pop up because I also know that the rate that you've put new content out is like once every 6 months. So hopefully this pops up in their feed. Hopefully you've listened to this whole thing through. Hopefully it doesn't blend in like camouflage with all the other shit that's out there on YouTube.
It
YouTube is a
probably
terrific
will,
source,
but
but I'm a good source for putting it all together into one final thought.
yeah, you if you
If
just keep talking for like the next 10 years, we'll be, who knows, we'll be running this country.
honestly, I mean, pizza buffet for president. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more just you could be president, and I'll be just I'll be
Yeah,
like
you'll be
secretary of I don't know, pizza,
Secretary of Affairs.
like sexual affairs.
Yeah. Well, you can just
What's
manage
like
it so that
what?
the whole
Okay,
cabinet can have orgies.
honestly, which one of those like what secretary of anything could I actually do where I'd be like? I mean, I'm obviously wouldn't know how to do any of them, but which one's one that you think I could actually wrap my head around and do
Okay, so most
efficiently?
people when they think of secretary, like if you've ever been secretary on like your school's,
But I'm thinking like government
student
level.
council, they think of secretary as like, oh, you're just the person that writes everything down.
Mm-hmm.
A secretary is just like a delegate of basically of the president, who's the secretary usually has. Their whole point is that their ability is to travel to places where the president cannot be, and for them to record and interact and report back.
Don't they have a
They're
arts or secretary of arts, right?
Secretary of the Arts.
There's got to be like some kind of like arts or
I mean,
culture.
maybe I've not looked into what every single secretary there is.
There's
There's
got to be a secretary of arts.
Secretary of Foreign Affairs, or like defense, all kind of stuff.
I could be a defense guy. These guns are real big. Let's get them. All right. Well, thank you for watching, or not watching. Either way, thank you.
Hopefully, you enjoyed the soothing sounds of my voice.
Yes. All right. Goodbye.